Well, it's been a few years since I've done a shop tour video, and I figured it's about time. So let me bring you downstairs into my small basement shop, and I'll show you what has changed since the last one. I've gotten some new power tools, I've gotten a new major piece of shop furniture to show you, as well as a bunch of other things. So let's head on downstairs and let's get into it. Howdy. Welcome back to Fisher Shop. It has been about 3 years since I've done a shop tour, so I figured I would show you around. There's a few things that are new and pretty exciting, and I wanted to share them with you. So first off, my shop is only 16 feet this way by 13 feet this way, so it's pretty small. It's kind of equivalent to a single car garage. There's a little bit more back there, but we'll get to it. So the plan is that I will start here and then just kind of work my way around, showing you guys each the ins and outs of every little piece of equipment that I have in here, as well as all the jigs and the fixtures. And then we'll kind of move back into the CNC area. And yeah, with that said, let's get started. Well, the first piece of furniture in the shop is the planer cart, and I like to kid around and I call this my 2-sheet tool seat, and that's because it only takes 2 sheets of plywood to make this entire cart. 1 3/4 inch and 1 1/2 inch sheet will do it. That's all you need, and you have a ton of storage. I have this thing packed full of all kinds of supplies, casters and knobs and hinges and brushes and you name it, but probably the biggest thing I use it for is this top drawer, and this is where I keep all my router bits. A lot of woodworkers will say avoid router bit sets, and that's because you'll never use all of them. Instead, they say it's more cost effective to buy a higher quality bit of the type that you're going to use most often. I get that, but I just like to have the different options that a set provides. And this one here, this is the CoWood brand. This is the one that I use for my trim routers, and it's got a lot of different options in there. I've used most of them, and it provides pretty decent quality. Not the best, but pretty good. So I'm pleased with it. This is the one I use for the trim routers. This is the one that I have for the router table. These have 1/2 inch shanks and even more options. So pretty pleased overall with the CoWood brand. I'll have links to all of these products down in the video description if you want to follow them and check them out for yourself. But these are available on Amazon. And then I have some other sets here. I have a Rockler set that is higher quality, and I do use those also whenever I get the chance. I have some other ones too that I bought over the years that are individual packaged. Those are different brand names. But for the most part, I'm using the CoWood ones, and that's the top drawer of my tool cart. So the 2-sheet tool seat is my planer stand. And for the planer, I'm using the DeWalt 735X. This is a 13-inch planer. And in my opinion, it is the highest quality, best performing planer that you can get before having to get a floor standing unit. And I just don't have the space in this shop for anything bigger than this. In fact, because of the space, whenever I'm not using it, I have it completely unhooked from power and dust collection and pushed out of the way against the wall. But whenever I do need to use it, I gotta haul it all out and hook it all up, and it's kind of a hassle, but it's what I need to do in this small shop. I just can't afford the space. But that being said, I'm very happy with this planer. I have conducted surgery on it many times. I've had to take it apart and fix various aspects of it, but overall, very pleased with the 735 from DeWalt. It does an excellent job, and I've even upgraded it. So let me show you what I've done. So the biggest upgrade I've done to the planer is I've added the Helix helical cutter head. This is a set of carbide teeth that are arranged in a helical pattern so it can offer spiral shear cuts to the stock as you feed it through instead of slapping it with flat knives. This will provide a much cleaner cut. You can put in highly figured wood and it still comes out great. Plus, when it comes time to sharpen, all you need to do is rotate each one of these little cutters 90 degrees, and then you have a brand new cutting surface on the whole cutter head. And you can do that, of course, 3 times, and then when you're done, replacing these knives is done at a fraction of the cost as what it would take to buy 4 sets of knives. So a wonderful upgrade. Highly encourage you to do it. And again, a link for the Helix cutter head for the DeWalt will be in the video description if you wanted to check it out. Well, after the planer, let me talk about what I have here on the wall behind me. And that's all of my table saw jigs. So I've got a total of 9 different jigs here on the wall. I've got 3 different videos on YouTube that go into depth on each one, how they're used, how they're made, as well as plans available on my website if you guys would like to make them for yourself. So let me start here on the left side and kind of move across the wall, and I'll describe what each one is used for very briefly so you get an idea. This first one here is a tapering jig, and that allows me to put a square edge on a rough sawn board, but you can adjust the angle. So if you needed to create a taper for, say, a set of table legs, you can do that very easily using that jig. Next to that is a thin strip jig. This allows me to cut very thin strips safely on the table saw that I can use for accents and cutting boards or edge banding or whatnot, but you can do it without ever having to make adjustments to your table saw fence, and that's kind of a really big deal. Next to that is a spline jig. This allows you to cut the relief for splines to be used and inserted to reinforce mitered corners in boxes or in picture frames. Down below that, this is a tenoning jig. It allows you to cut tenons for bridle joints or angled bridle joints. You can do a lot with that one. Down below that is a miter gauge attachment that is used to cut exact 45-degree corners for picture frames. Now that attaches onto this one over here, and that's my crosscut sled. That's probably the most widely used shop jig, table saw jig that I have. So I really like the design I came up with for my crosscut sled. So definitely check that one out if you are thinking of making a crosscut sled for yourself. This one here is probably my most enjoyable one to use. This is my box joint jig version 2.0 table saw jig that helps me cut box joints or finger joints. It is just such a pleasure to use. It's so much fun. It's very precise, and it just seems to make beautiful finger joints every time I use it. This one down here is a dovetail jig. This allows you to cut dovetail joints on the table saw. I know, it's kind of mind-blowing, but it's actually 4 jigs in one. It has a single runner down the center, and so you can use it on this portion, this portion, this portion, and this portion. And it's very cleverly done, so that's another really fun one to check out if you're interested in that. The very last one here is my circle cutting jig. It's adjustable. It allows you to cut circles on a table saw. Another mind-blowing thing, right? But it's adjustable to a point where you can cut a very small circle, or you can really cut a big one, almost the size of a tabletop. So those are my shop jigs, table saw jigs rather. So check out the plans for those on my website. Well, next up is by far the most popular piece of shop furniture I have, and that is the Fisher's Flip Cart. I have sold thousands, tens of thousands of copies of the plans to make this cart on my website. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly advise you to do that. It essentially allows you to have 2 different machines on the same footprint. So here on top, I have the Ridgid oscillating belt and spindle sander. And if I wanted to gain access to this piece of equipment, I simply unlatch a window sash lock over here, and I can flip the entire unit, and I can secure it with another lock on this side. Now I have access to a 12-inch central machinery disc sander. Furthermore, everything is wired internal to the cart, so everything is already plugged in and ready to use. If I needed to use the disc sander, I could. If I need to use the belt sander, I can, just like that. So super handy, super easy cart to build, and it's just a wonderful space saver. So happy that I have this in the shop. Next up is my bandsaw, which is completely covered in stickers. I have the Rikon 10324. It is a 14-inch bandsaw. And the reason why I bought this one is because of the price point, but as well as to have the ability to do some resawing. And this saw has performed for years now. Honestly, I have no complaints with it whatsoever. I did originally, and that was because of it was such a hassle to change blades on it. But since then, I have installed and upgraded it with Rikon's toolless guide bearing retrofit kit. So now I can change blades without needing any tools. I can do it relatively quickly, and I have this thing dialed in and working quite well. So this has been a pleasure to use. I have it installed on a Bora mobile tool base, and that allows me to kind of pull it away from the wall when doing large cuts. But it has worked really well for me for a number of years now. So yeah, I recommend this one. Tucked in the wall behind the bandsaw is the track for my Tracksaw. I have the Craig AccuCut system. This is a cheap alternative to a dedicated Tracksaw that you can get at the big box store for like 90 bucks. It comes with a cradle that you can attach to your circular saw. And with this, I've been able to break down full sheets of plywood. I've been able to even rip hardwood slabs. So it has been very, very useful to me. It's performed wonderfully, and I haven't really had the need to spend much more money on a dedicated Tracksaw system. This has been enough for me so far, but we'll see what the future holds. So this bench in the back corner of my shop kind of becomes the catch-all for a whole bunch of miscellaneous junk during my projects. Anytime I have something in my hands and I need to set it down, it usually ends up here, and this is a cluttered mess, but it's all nice and clean now. This is also the area where I keep all my different types of glue and bread nails and bench cookies and tape measures. That's where I have my vise. And it's also where I have every flathead screw in the world. So all these little hardware bins and these organizers used to be my grandfather's. He was a woodworker as well, and he passed them down to my father, who was a woodworker, and he passed them down to me. So I like to dig in there and dig through all these different nuts and bolts and screws that my grandfather used to use in his projects and try to find a spot where I can integrate one of them into my projects as well. So that's why I add them. That's why you see those flathead screws in my projects. You're probably wondering, why has he got this fascination with flathead screws? I don't. They're horrible to use, but I use them to kind of pay tribute to both my grandfather and my father, because they kind of gave me the skills that I have today. So that's why I use them. As far as my vise, I know in the last tour I told you I was probably going to upgrade to a proper woodworker's vise. I still haven't. I still have this old Wilton Mechanics vise. I've replaced the sharp, jagged metal jaws with some walnut ones so that I can clamp pieces from my project in there without them getting all marred up. I do have a whole bunch of those jaws pre-made so that if this one gets worn and tore up, then I can just swap to a new set. But it's actually worked out really well for me. I do like how adjustable it is. So not only can it spin down, but it can go to the left and the right. Fortunately, when I'm pushing a long piece through the bandsaw, I can tip it down in this direction and it will just pass right over the vise. But I do at some point need to get a proper vise, but for now, this actually has worked quite well for me, and it's been cheap, and I do love how adjustable it is. So let's move on. This brings us to the back of the shop, which is the French Cleat tool wall. Now, if you're not familiar with what a French cleat is, it's when you have a horizontal rail with an angled top edge. Then on the back of a tool holder, you have that matching angle so that it can hook over this rail and be held securely. Now, using this methodology, I've been able to be really creative and come up with all kinds of different tool holders for my various tools, for the power tools and for the measuring tools and my saws and for the drill bits and for the hand tools. And it's just been a lot of fun being creative and coming up with all kinds of different tool holders. Now, another really good reason of using this methodology is that I can arrange and rearrange my tool wall in a matter of minutes. Plus, everything is readily accessible, easy to get to. I'm taking advantage of all the space of this entire wall, and it's all flat against it. Nothing's really sticking out, and it takes up a lot less room. So that's why I use French cleats. Something I get asked often is what made me choose the Ridgid line of power tools when there's so many other options out there. Years ago, when I was first getting into woodworking, I was looking for something that was affordable, but also had a really good warranty. I've only ever had one problem with the tool over all these years I've had it, and because of that lifetime warranty, they sent me a brand new one. So that's the reason why I went with Ridgid. That's kind of the reason why I'm sticking with Ridgid. Yeah, the tools are a bit bigger and clunkier, but they work. They're very reliable, and I'm still pretty happy with them. So for a sanding solution, I use the 6-inch electronic ray from Surf Prep, and this is an outstanding sander. I've used it for years now. It has never let me down. Compared to its equivalents of the Festool and Mirka brand, it is just as good, if not better. Attached to that is the Festool CT15 dust extractor. This is the smallest one that they have to offer, but it's dedicated to the sander, so I don't feel I'm really missing out on much. The sander is wired directly through the dust extractor, so it automatically turns on and turns off whenever I need to sand something. So it's really, really handy. Plus, I have everything positioned right behind my main bench where I do most of my sanding. Also, around the dust collection hose for the sander, I have a sleeve that is made by a company called Dakota. And what this does is it covers up all of the ridges so that it never gets caught on sharp edges of your bench or of the project that you're sanding on. And since the sander is dedicated to the dust collector, I went ahead and I fished the power cord through as well. So now absolutely nothing will get hung up on either the edge of the bench or on whatever it is that I'm sanding. All right, here we are in the other back corner of the shop, and I have another one of these cheesy workbenches that I got off Craigslist years ago. I would just throw a piece of melamine here on top of it to kind of give a nice flat clean surface to work on, and then when that would get all marred up and beat up, then I would just flip it, and wouldn't you know it, the other side of this one is even worse than this. So I am definitely due for a new piece of melamine, but just haven't gotten around to it. What's nice though is this bench is powered on both front legs. I have an outlet over there and I have one here where I can plug some things in. I have my pancake compressor down there, which is wired to this switch. So one quick flick of the switch and that turns on the compressor and it pumps up a series of black iron pipe that I have down there, and off of that pipe I have some pneumatic tool ports. So I have just a little dust sprayer plugged in to one of those ports. I have a 18 gauge brad nailer, and then I have one extra air port that I can use for another tool if I wish to. I don't use my pneumatic tools all that often, but I do prefer them. I prefer the brad nailer over my battery powered one just because it's smaller, it's quicker. It just seems a little bit easier to use. But then I'm also confined to this area. I can't really do any brad nailing anywhere but on this main bench of mine. So that's this bench. Underneath it, on the other side, I have my table saw blade sharpener. and my miter saw blade sharpener. I did a pretty extensive video and a review of that sharpener. It works absolutely wonderfully. I've saved a ton of money sharpening my own blades, and it couldn't be easier with this tool. So I do highly recommend that one, and I'll have links to it in the video description. Now, if you guys watched my previous shop tour video, you might recall that I had nothing good to say about my drill press. It was a pretty junky piece of equipment. Parts of it were broken. It was literally duct taped together. It was very unreliable. It was loud. But now I have a brand new drill press. This is the 14-inch Grizzly T33902 drill press. I believe they just added it to their website, and they wanted to get this out to me and get my thoughts on it. So there will be a more in-depth, full-length video and a review on this drill press coming to my channel soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But this is a floor standing unit. So my other one was a bench top. This is a floor standing one, so I have a ton more capacity. It's got a bunch of cool features on it, and it works. So I am very, very thrilled with it so far. And next to that, I have my primary workbench. This has got to be one of the nicest and prettiest things I've ever designed and built. What's great about this in this tiny shop is that I can fold up the sides. So there's a wing on each side to expand the work area and to make the bench bigger. When they're fully deployed, it's 90 inches long, so that's a ton of workspace for me. And when I'm not using it, I can fold down those wings and get back my space. I keep my hold down clamps in this first cabinet here, and these are made by Bessie. And what's interesting is that these are actually for a welding table. But Bessie also makes this adapter that you can put onto the end so that it'll fit down into a 3/4 inch dog hole of a woodworking bench. So this has been perfect for me. They're super easy to use, high quality, and they're right here at my bench. So it doesn't get any easier than that. I'm using undermount drawer slides for all of the drawers and cabinets, so they all open and close very, very smoothly. Now, one of the pet peeves that I had on my previous workbench was that all the dust and the shavings that came off my project when I was working on top of the bench, it would fall through the dog holes and it would just cover everything that I had underneath my bench. Well, in this design, I incorporated dust collection trays. So it keeps that from happening, and it's a real simple way to keep things clean underneath, and you can just vacuum this out when it gets all nasty, and then there you go. In this last cabinet, I have kind of like a flatbed cabinet where I keep my Delta 1-inch strip sander. This is from the Stone Age, and I've actually had to rebuild some of the casing and the dust port out of wood because it broke off. But this thing still works. It works great, and it's small enough where I can just sort of store it inside of my bench. Next to that, I have the WorkSharp WS3000. This is what I use to dry sharpen all of my hand planes and all of my chisels. This thing, I'm telling you, this thing is fantastic. There is no easier way to keep your chisels razor sharp than this thing. And what's nice is that it's so convenient for me to use. I can just pull it out. I have internal integrated power right here. I can plug it in, throw it on top of my bench, and I can touch up all my chisels immediately after using them, and everything stays sharp. Now, this bench has been probably the biggest upgrade that I've ever put into my shop. It has just been an absolute game changer. Now, if you'd like to build this bench for your shop, I have plans available for just the bench, and then I also have another set of plans for all of the storage that goes on the inside of it. So those are available on my website. If you'd like to try tackling this project for yourself, it is a huge, huge upgrade. All right, what's next? All right, folks, now that you're knee-deep in woodworking heaven with Fisher's Shop, let me take just a quick minute to introduce you to a place that's been a game changer for me, and that's the Woodworkers Guild of America. This place is like a treasure trove of woodworking wisdom. They've got over 1,000 videos in their repository, and it's become my go-to resource whenever I need a bit of inspiration or a new technique to try. And let me tell you, having access to some incredibly talented instructors has been very valuable. From understanding the basics all the way up to professional cabinet making, there's an absolute ton of topics to learn and master. They've got classes and DVDs and books and guides, but in my opinion, what really sets them apart are those live Q&A sessions and demonstrations. Being able to interact with the instructors in real time has been an absolute game changer for me. And they've got a special offer going on now too. The first 1,000 of you to click the link in the video description will get a full year of premium membership to the Woodworkers Guild of America for just $1.49. That's a pretty amazing deal. Well, I'll see you over there. And this brings us to the heart of the shop, and that is the table saw. I have the SawStop ProCab 1.75 horsepower table saw, and I also have the 36-inch T-Glide fence for it. There is a modification I had to make to it though. Because my primary workbench sits lower than the dust collection port on the back of the table saw, I had to route that out the side. I drilled a hole in the plastic shroud and routed the dust hose out that way and underneath the bench. It runs back behind the table saw and out the other side where it connects to a Rikon floor dust collector. I also had the table saw and the dust collector attached to one of these automatic switches so that whenever I turn on the table saw, it automatically turns on the dust collector, and I never have to worry about forgetting to do that. Off the left side of the table saw, I have the Woodpecker's router table extension. And this is kind of unique to be something that comes off the left side of the table saw. Typically they're on the right side, but I just don't have room on the right side of my table saw for a router table. It had to be on the left. I used to have the Woodpecker's router lift inside of this table, but I ended up getting rid of that. It's been replaced now with a router lift from Jessam. And this also includes their Jessam router, and I also got the variable speed controller for that router. So this is a fantastic setup now. I'm very, very impressed with this router lift. The action is super smooth, and it's very quick to get your router bit dialed in at the exact correct height. So I am super pleased with this so far. And just to keep things close and handy, I simply attached a bunch of magnets to the back of the accessories, and I just sort of have them attached here. Back behind my table saw is my jointer. This is the Ridgid 6-inch JP0610, and this has been a great piece of shop equipment for me. It's been a pleasure to use. I purchased it on the used market years and years ago. I think I paid something like $400 for it. It came with a set of straight knives and this mobile base, which has been nice if I need to move it out of the way for some reason, but for the most, it just stays situated right here. It does have a shorter in-feed and out-feed than what I would like, but I'm so limited on space, I really can't afford to get anything much bigger than this. So this is my joiner, and I'm super pleased with it. I did do an upgrade to it. I put the Shelix cutter head into it, the same brand that I put into my planer, but this one is specifically made just for this jointer, and it changed the game. It cuts so smoothly, there's no tear out, boards just glide across it, it's quieter, and it creates tinier shavings so it's easier on your dust collection. Above the joiner is my clamp wall, and as the popular expression goes, you can never have enough clamps. As much as I like to agree with that, I don't really have much more room for more clamps. I've got a variety here of F-style, squeeze clamps, parallel clamps, and then over above the door, coming into the shop, I have my right-angled clamps that I got from Rockler. I have a bunch of old pipe clamps from my grandfather, and now I've even run out of room here, so I've had to wrap around the wall and store a bunch of clamps on the other side as well. So as much as I would like to add more clamps to my collection, because I know I could use them, I just don't have the room. I've run out. The last thing for me to show you in this area of the shop is my miter station. Now for my miter saw, I chose to go with the Bosch Axial Glide. The reason why I went with this saw is because my previous one had a set of bars that stuck out way far in the back, and it just took up a whole bunch of extra room that was unnecessary. Bosch came up with a very unique design which allows you to push the saw all the way up against the wall, so you're not wasting any space whatsoever. Now I have made some improvements to the saw, one of which is this dust collection shroud. This allows me to get my vacuum hose right down there next to the cut, and since it's all boxed in, it collects over 95% of the dust. So this thing has been very effective in keeping all the dust mess down. I have a video on my YouTube channel which goes in depth showing how I made this, as well as showing just how well it performs. The other thing I added is a shadow line. So I took apart a sewing light and I actually fixed the light up inside of the shroud above the blade. This shines down and creates a perfect shadow of the blade onto the workpiece. So now there is absolutely no guessing where the saw is going to cut. It is going to be right where the shadow is showing it's going to be. So it makes lining up your cuts really, really easy and quick. Plus, it sheds a little bit of light onto your project, making it easier to see. Now, I do have a full-length video on how I did this modification on my channel if you want to do something similar for your saw, but if you do, be cautious. I had some people on my channel tell me that's dangerous, you shouldn't mount the light like that, it's gonna explode and we're all gonna die. Well, I thought, come on now, it's fine, it's gonna be fine, everything's fine, it's fine. Well, they were right. I was using the saw not too long after I made that modification, and the hot glue gave out. The light fell down into the spinning blade. It sent shrapnel everywhere. It completely exploded, and I had to change my pants. So, if you do this modification, make sure that you completely secure it really well. I took apart and I installed a new light in there, and this time I drilled holes, I tapped it, and I put screws in there to hold it very firmly, plus I have epoxy in there as well. So just go that extra mile and make sure that you keep your underwear clean. Now for the miter station itself, this is something that I designed to work as a space saver. It has these wings that if you need the extra support to the right or to the left, these wings deploy and they are flush with the bed of the saw. So if I need some extra support on the left, I can unlock these wheels, kind of pull it out from the wall just a little bit, and then I can lift this side up. Then I can kind of push it back, and now I have all this extra space to the right and the left of the saw for support if I'm cutting long boards. Underneath, I have a shop vac as well as a dust deputy. Now the shop vac itself is a Vac Master. I've really grown to like that brand. It's the only thing I'll ever buy going forward. This shop vac has been turned on and off probably tens of thousands of times, and it is super reliable. It's never given up. It's never burned out like other shop vacs I've had. Attached to that is the Dust Deputy Cyclone system made by Oneida. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, as sawdust is coming off the saw, getting sucked down here, it goes into this cyclone and it drops down into this bucket. It never actually makes it to the shop vac. So the shop vac itself is clean, the filter's clean, it never gets clogged up, I never lose suction power, and everything ends up here in this bucket. The whole thing is wired together into one of these automatic switches so that whenever the saw gets turned on, the vacuum gets turned on. It stays on like 5 seconds or so after the saw is turned off to make sure all the dust gets sucked up and gets down into the collection bin. All right, well that wraps up the miter station. Now if you'd like to build this thing for your shop and your saw, I have very detailed step-by-step plans available on my website over at fishersshoponline.com. So check that out if you'd like to build any of the shop furniture that I've showed you so far. Well, that wraps up this main area of the shop. Let's head on back here into the robot room. Well, it's a bit tighter back here. It's only 10 feet this way by 13 feet this way. And I have to walk around my water heater, and I got to twist sideways to get by my furnace. But this is where I keep my primary dust collector. This is the Supercell from Oneida, and this is an extremely powerful cyclone system. It has a 14-gallon dust capacity, and the way I have it configured is I have a 4-inch hose coming off the side of it, going down, back behind my miter saw, underneath my table saw, and around to the other side. Over there is a Y adapter with a blast gate and a reducer. Off the reducer, it drops down to a 2.5-inch hose, and then from there, I can connect it to whatever tool I want to use. I like this method because it means I don't have to have a crazy network of dust collection pipes plumbed all throughout the shop. Instead, I can use a centralized hose and then just stretch it out to whatever tool I'm using at the moment where I need some dust collection. But just to give you an idea of how powerful it is, the blast gate on the Y adapter is used so that I can throttle back some of the suction. Since this dust collector is so strong, I actually have to reduce the suction power for some of my tools. Another really cool feature of the Supercell is that it's self-cleaning. There's a lever back here that when pressed, it will reverse the suction and actually unclog the filter if there's a dust buildup in there. That will help you maintain a clean filter and therefore good suction. All of that dust drops down into the bin below, and then you can just carry it out whenever you empty it. So you might be thinking, 14 gallons, you must be emptying that thing all the time. Well, I do have to empty it pretty often, but I actually am very happy with the size because I don't think with my back and these tight quarters here in this shop, I don't think I could handle anything bigger. So when it's time to empty, I can just unlatch the bin, pull out the bag, and walk it right out my basement. And being the good neighbor that I am, I just take it over to my neighbor's house and I dump it all into his pool. So next to the Supercell, I have another wall-mounted shop vac, VacMaster brand, and this is specifically designated for dust collection on the CNC. It also goes through a cyclone system. This is the brand new Oneida Low Pro Dust Deputy. Same thing as I have underneath the miter saw, except they've now designed a lower profile for the cyclone, so it takes up even less space. Next to that, I have the central vac for the house, so not really that interesting. And then this is my CNC machine on my mobile assembly table. I have the Onefinity X50 Pro woodworker, and I have that mounted on one of the sides of my mobile assembly table. So I have a whole video about designing and building this table, but this allows me to fold up my CNC and get it out of the way when I'm not using it, because when I am using it, it takes up this entire area. Let me set it up for you and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So pretty much just like that, it sets up really easy. What's cool is that if I wanted to, I could flip it the other way and I would have a flat surface to do some regular assembling on if I needed to. Everything is internally wired into this table so that all I need to do is plug in this one extension cord over into an outlet over there, and then I can use my CNC. For the dust collector, I bring that over just like so, and there's a small zip tie that I have wrapped around the hose, and that hangs right from this hook. This part goes into the spindle shroud, and then I can use it dust-free. How about that? And it fits back into the corner just like that. So this thing has been a huge space saver, and I've loved having it around. It's super handy to keep my CNC out of the way when I'm not using it, but yet also be very quick to deploy when I do need to use the CNC. Unfortunately, that means I can't ever really upgrade my CNC. Onefinity has come out with some really amazing new models, bigger models, and I just don't have the space for it. I can't use it. But anyways, if you like the look of this table, I do have plans for this available on my site as well. All around the top of this room, I have a bunch of like visqueen that is all bunched up, and it can be dropped and pulled down, and I can kind of form a makeshift spray booth. And I do that from time to time whenever I need to spray finish on some of my projects. I just position them here in the center of the room, and then I can spray, and the plastic keeps the finish from getting on anything or getting into the furnace and then getting blown out throughout the rest of the house. For a sprayer, I use the Erlex Sprayport 6003, which I don't even think you can get this anymore. But it's a decent sprayer, and it's treated me well. All right, over on this side of the robot room is where I keep my hollow chisel mortiser. And you probably can't even really recall me ever using this tool. I've used it a couple times in videos, but the reason why I don't use it more frequently is because I don't want to imply that one of these is needed in order to build the projects that I'm trying to sell plans for, because they're kind of rare. Not many people have them. If you're unfamiliar with what a hollow chisel mortiser is, basically it's a drill press that can drill square holes. So it's super handy when it comes to drilling out mortises for mortise and tenon joinery. So super cool tool, but I don't use it all that often. All the rest of the space down here I have pretty much consumed up for lumber storage. Now I have a couple of these black steel racks, and this one I have loaded up with a bunch of smaller pieces, exotic species, cutting boards, other blanks, and just a mismatch of a variety of different things that I didn't quite want to throw in the scrap bin just yet. Down the hall next to it is where I pretty much keep all of my sheet goods. So if I have a bunch of plywood, usually the scraps will end up down there. Then this wall is the ever popular French Cleat lumber rack that I made years and years ago. It's still going strong. And this is nice because it's very easily customizable. So if I use up all the lumber on a couple of these cleats, then I can kind of rearrange things, and I can use those cleats to hold different lumber. And I have a bunch of these racks as well. These I just picked up off Amazon, and I'll have a link to them in the video description. These things are wonderful. They're super easy to install. They hold a ton of weight, and they're easy to adjust if you don't like the spacing that you have. I'm out here in the garage now, and I just wanted to show you I have a little bench that I think I got from Harbor Freight, and I have my laser set up next to it on an old desk that I used to use. I got that from IKEA. Now I've had like 7 different lasers in the past, and this is just the one that I happen to have right now. This is the IKEA K1 Pro Max. It is a 48 watt diode laser, and so far it's treated me pretty well. Well, this is the Fisher Shop Sound Studio. This sits just behind my shop, and this is where I come to record all the voiceovers for my videos, as well as all the different shows that I have for my podcast. You can see a lot more about how I built out this studio in a video that I have on my channel. And be sure to go and check out my podcast. It's called We Built the Thing, and we just pushed out our 250th episode. I get asked a lot about what kind of recording hardware I use to make my videos, and believe it or not, I use a tripod that I found at Goodwill, and I think that was like $5, and my Canon EOS 60D, which I bought used for I think a couple $100 years ago. And it is a DSLR, but it's not mirrorless, and it has held up and performed great over the years despite me being so rough with it here in the shop. So shout out to Canon for that. I only have 2 lenses. I have a 24mm and a 50mm for a close-up shot, but that's it. 2 lenses, 1 cheap camera, and everything else I just use my phone for. All right, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit you with a shotgun list of a whole bunch of tools that I have found have been really awesome for me, and that I think they're kind of like those tools that you just got to get for your own shop. All right, here we go. This is going to be quick. This is an air quality monitor made by iClever. It lights up green here on the bottom if everything is good, and then the light switches to yellow or to red depending on the quality of the air. Cadence Manufacturing makes a whole line of CNC bits called the Jenny line, some of the best CNC bits I've ever used. McFarland Customs makes these adapters that click onto your sander at an exact 90 degrees, so they act as a guide when edge sanding, or you can even mount them down onto your bench and use your sander as a disc sander. WWGOA offers a new kind of digital caliper which is rechargeable. Jessam just came out with a new precision miter gauge. It's got fixed stops at certain points. It's micro adjustable. It has a flip stop. This is a really, really nice miter gauge. Speaking of Jessam, they came out with these tool gauges which allows you to dial in the perfect height or depth of cut on your table saw or your router table. Additionally, Jessam just came out with this no-slip ruler, where if you put your fingers on this section, the ruler will not slip on the material. RALI came out with a hand plane that uses disposable blades, so you can reverse the blade or you can just replace it to always have a sharp plane on hand. The MakerCalc app. This is a real-time fraction calculator for woodworkers. This thing is a fantastic app. It keeps a history of all your measurements and it just makes it all easier. Two Cherries bench chisels. These are the nicest chisels I've ever used, and they've held up to quite a beating. This is the Nighthawk dust boot for my CNC, made by Solified Designs KC. This thing is absolutely fantastic. This is the Bessie Tracksaw clamp. Super quick to use, works amazingly well. And this is the Universal Featherboard Pro from MagSwitch. It's a featherboard that's magnetic. Once you turn those knobs, it is unmovable. Turn them back and it releases like magic. This thing is amazing. These are drawer face clamps from Rockler. This is essentially a third and fourth hand if you're ever making drawers. This holds on the face of the drawer perfectly centered so that you can screw it on and attach it from the inside. And as a shameless plug to me, everyone needs a Fisher's Shop reusable push stick. Once the bottom gets chewed up, you can cut off the bottom because the back here is square, glue on a new one using these 2 points as clamping points, and then glue on a bottom catch. Because this comes up, you can fit a clamp in there. I sell these on the website, so check it out. Well, that's pretty much all of Fisher's Shop. So let me know down in the comments below if there's a specific tool that you've added to your shop that has really been a game changer, or let me know if there's another clever idea you have of where I could take advantage of some of the very limited space I have left here in this shop. Hey, thanks so much for joining me on this tour. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and you think I've earned it, maybe click that like button and subscribe to the channel. Well, until next time, thanks so much. Take it easy, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye. Out, unhook it, or... Plus, I just had a brain fart. Right onto the crap. In the same factory, and this one gets painted orange, and jet... orange. This one gets painted orange. Number is JP0610. Water heater, why do you do that? And it came with a set of straight knives and and some phlegm. Very detailed step-by-step, and that hit my shin and that hurt so bad. Let's head on back to the computer room. It's not a computer room. Why would I say computer room? It's not even a computer back there. And it's going to fall into the blade and it's going to explode and it's dangerous. You shouldn't do that. Oh my gosh, listen to the dryer.
No.